Nancy Guthrie was reported missing Sunday afternoon in Arizona, and it is believed she was taken against her will.
An 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker, a masked man on her front porch at 1:47 in the morning, a doorbell camera that goes dark at exactly the wrong moment, and 3 months later, the FBI still cannot find her. This is the case of Nancy Guthrie, and what makes it haunting is not what's missing from the evidence. It's what is in the evidence, sitting in plain sight, and still not enough to bring her home.
That holster is so cheap that you won't even find that in the bargain bin at the gun store.
Her name is Nancy Guthrie. She is the mother of Today Show co-host Savannah Guthrie. And on the night of January 31st, 2026, after a family dinner, she was dropped off at her own home in the Catalina Foothills outside Tucson, Arizona. The doorbell camera shows her safe at her front door at 9:48 p.m. She walked inside. 4 hours later, something went wrong. By the time the sun came up, Nancy Guthrie was gone, and the house she had just walked into was a crime scene. 3 months on, her case is still open, and the longer you sit with the timeline, the stranger it gets. The timeline that breaks your heart. This is the part of the story that nobody covers carefully enough, and it is the part that matters most. January 31st, 2026. Nancy Guthrie spends the evening with family, a normal family dinner. At 9:48 p.m., she is dropped off at her home in the Catalina Foothills, an upscale neighborhood north of Tucson. The doorbell camera records her arrival. She is fine. She is alone, but she is fine. The night, by every available indication, is over. 3 hours and 59 minutes later, at 1:47 a.m., her doorbell camera disconnects. That is not a malfunction. We know this because of what the FBI later recovered from the device. Someone walked up to her front door, masked, gloved, armed, and tried to knock the camera off the wall with what investigators described as light taps. When that didn't work, they covered the lens with foliage from one of her own potted plants. 41 minutes after that, at 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's Pacemaker app disconnects from her phone. That detail is the one that should make you stop. A pacemaker is not optional. It is not a piece of jewelry. It is a medical device that monitors and regulates the heart of the woman wearing it. The pacemaker did not stop. The connection between the pacemaker and her phone stopped, which means at 2:28 in the morning, either Nancy Guthrie was no longer near her phone or her phone was no longer in the house, or both. The next morning, she missed church. She had plans to attend an online service at a friend's house and never showed up. By noon on Sunday, February 1st, the family called 911. When deputies arrived, they found the back door of the house propped open. They found Nancy's phone inside the house. They found her purse inside the house. They found a trail of blood drops near the front door. DNA testing later confirmed the blood was hers. She was gone. And here is the timeline detail that turned a suspected kidnapping into something worse. The blood, the propped open back door, the purse and phone left behind. The 4-hour window between the doorbell going dark and any chance of rescue. Whoever came for Nancy Guthrie that night did not stumble onto her house. They knew exactly when she would be alone, exactly where the cameras were, and exactly how to disappear before sunrise. The man on the porch. On February 10th, 9 days after the disappearance, the FBI released what they had been able to recover from the doorbell camera. 2 still images and a short video of the figure who walked up to Nancy Guthrie's front door at 1:47 a.m. on the morning she vanished. What's on that footage is the closest thing this case has to a face. And there is no face, just a shape. The FBI released the physical description publicly. Male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall. Average build, dark mustache visible through the mask. Wearing a black ski mask, gloves, and a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack, the kind sold exclusively at Walmart. He was armed. The handgun was placed in what investigators described as an apparent holster, worn improperly, positioned over the front of his body in a way that even people who don't know firearms recognized as wrong. The Pima County Sheriff later described that holster as having pretty unique characteristics, distinctive enough that agents began carrying images of it to gun stores across Tucson, asking if anyone recognized the make. Then there was the wrist. A former FBI supervisory special agent and criminal profiler named Jim Clemente reviewed the doorbell footage on camera for media. He noticed something most people watching would have missed. A marking, possibly a tattoo, visible on the suspect's right wrist where the glove ended and the jacket cuff began. Clemente said it directly. If it's a tattoo, it could help investigators rule in or rule out potential suspects, and it could help the public help them. That is not a man speculating on television. That is a former federal agent telling anyone listening that the Bureau is already cross-referencing that wrist against names already in their system. The FBI also noted what appeared to be a ring on one of the suspect's fingers, visible through the glove material in the footage. A man who is 5'9" to 5'10", a dark mustache, a possible tattoo on his right wrist, a ring on his hand, a backpack from Walmart, a holster he didn't know how to wear. That is not a phantom. That is a person. A person who walked up to an 84-year-old woman's front door at 1:47 in the morning and is now somewhere out there, 3 months later, going about his day. If you've been following this case and you want every credible update as it lands, no speculation, no naming people who haven't been charged, just the verified facts, subscribe and turn on notifications. Genetic genealogy is running on the DNA right now, and when it returns a name, this case will move fast. The night before the night. There is one more piece of footage that matters, and most people covering this story have not given it the weight it deserves. Investigators have asked anyone within a 2-mile radius of the Catalina Foothills home to submit any surveillance footage they captured in the days before February 1st. Specifically, they want to see what the neighborhood looked like in the week leading up to the abduction, because there is reason to believe the suspect, or someone working with the suspect, was already in the area before the night they came back to take her. The Guthrie home sits in a neighborhood that is, by any standard, unfriendly to strangers. It is upscale, it is gated in places, it is the kind of place where neighbors notice unfamiliar cars and unfamiliar people on foot. And the way the suspect moved on. The night of February 1st, the precision of the timing, the disabling of the camera, the awareness of where the back door was and how to leave suggests someone who had already studied the property. That is what former FBI Assistant Director John Miller told a podcast host recently when he said, "Plainly, I think the answer is in Tucson." He meant it the way it sounds. Not a criminal who passed through, not a stranger who picked the house at random. Someone with local knowledge. Someone who knew the layout of the neighborhood, the rhythm of the family, the schedule of the woman who lived alone in that house with a pacemaker and limited mobility. Someone, possibly, who had walked past the property before, possibly more than once, possibly with a backpack on, testing the angles. Miller is not an outsider speculating. He spent his career inside the FBI's most senior counterterrorism and intelligence positions. When he says the answer is in Tucson, he is describing what the evidence pattern looks like to people who have spent decades reading these patterns. The suspect knew the camera was there. The suspect knew the camera angle. The suspect approached from the direction that gave the camera the least useful angle, then disabled it. That is not improvisation. That is reconnaissance. Somewhere in the surveillance footage from those Catalina Foothills neighbors, in the days and possibly weeks before February 1st, there is almost certainly a frame that shows the same person, or someone working with that person, doing exactly what people do when they are studying a target. Walking past, looking, logging, coming back. The question is whether anyone has caught it on a camera that hasn't been reviewed yet. The evidence on the floor. Let's talk about what the FBI actually has, because the public version of this case has been distorted by speculation, and the real evidence is more interesting than the rumors. The blood on the front porch belongs to Nancy Guthrie. Forensic testing confirmed it. The trail of drops, the location near the front door, suggests something happened in or just outside the house that injured her before she was moved. The Pima County Sheriff has not disclosed how much blood or what the spatter pattern indicates, but a retired FBI agent who reviewed the publicly available crime scene description told one outlet he believes the pattern is more consistent with a single abductor than a team. Other former agents disagree and lean toward two people. Nobody outside the investigation knows for certain. What is certain is that the FBI is now analyzing DNA evidence recovered from inside the home using advanced sequencing technology. Sources told ABC News in April that a private Florida lab had sent the FBI what they described as a potentially critical sample. That language is not casual. Investigators do not use the word critical for evidence that is unlikely to lead anywhere. They use it for evidence that they believe will name someone. Some of that evidence is reportedly a hair sample. Hair is one of the most valuable forensic specimens in modern investigative work because of where it can take you. If it has a viable root, it produces a full DNA profile. If it doesn't, it can still produce mitochondrial DNA, which traces maternal lineage. Either way, in the era of investigative genetic genealogy, a single hair can lead to a name. The FBI is also reviewing a glove that was found approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's house, in a field beside a road. The glove visually matches the gloves worn by the suspect in the doorbell footage. Initially, that glove looked like the casebreaker. The DNA on it, however, was eventually traced to a local restaurant worker whom the Pima County Sheriff publicly described as not part of this investigation. The glove had been worn by someone before it was used or discarded by the suspect, and that is, frankly, the kind of forensic disappointment that investigators learn to absorb. But the hair is different. The hair was inside the home. Investigative genetic genealogy is the technique that identified the Golden State Killer in 2018, more than 4 decades after his crimes. It identified Brian Kohberger in the University of Idaho murders. It works by uploading an unknown DNA profile to public genealogy databases like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, then walking through family trees of distant relatives until investigators converge on a single individual. The suspect does not have to have ever submitted their own DNA to a commercial service. A second cousin is enough. A great aunt is enough. In the era we now live in, anyone who has done one of those mail-in kits has, without realizing it, also entered every blood relative they will ever have into the genealogical search system, including ones they don't know about, including, possibly, the one who walked up to Nancy Guthrie's front door at 1:47 in the morning. The notes that nobody can verify. This is the part of the case that has caused the most confusion in public coverage, and it deserves a careful walkthrough. In the days after Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, multiple media outlets received what appeared to be ransom communications. The CBS affiliate KOLD-TV in Tucson received a letter on February 2nd that was specific enough about details of the home and what Nancy was wearing that investigators reviewed it and shared it with the FBI. The contents were never publicly released. The next day, TMZ received a different communication, this one demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin, with a specific cryptocurrency address and a deadline. 2 more notes followed. One of them claimed the sender had seen Nancy alive in Sonora, Mexico, with her abductors. Another claimed knowledge of who the kidnapper was and offered to identify them in exchange for payment. The FBI has neither confirmed nor denied the authenticity of any of these communications. The reason is straightforward. In a high-profile case with a $1 million family reward and a separate FBI reward, ransom hoaxers are an inevitable problem. One man, Derek Colella, has already been charged in connection with a fake ransom scheme tied to this case. The Mexican embassy has stated publicly there is no indication Nancy Guthrie is in Mexico. What that means in practical terms is that the ransom notes cannot be relied on as evidence of anything except the existence of people willing to exploit a missing 84-year-old woman for money. Whether any of them came from someone with actual knowledge of the case remains, 3 months in, an open question. The family. The sheriff cleared. There is one more thing that needs to be said clearly, because the comment sections on this case have been brutal, and most of what gets said is wrong. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos issued a public statement weeks into the investigation, stating that all members of Nancy Guthrie's family, including her children, their siblings, and their spouses, have been cleared as possible suspects. His exact words were that to suggest otherwise is not only wrong, it is cruel. That is the sheriff of the county where the crime happened, with full access to the investigation, telling the public on the record that the family is not a part of this case. You will see videos and posts and threads claiming otherwise. You will see accusations directed at specific named family members. You will see speculation about marriages and relationships and finances and motives. None of it has been endorsed by the people actually running this investigation. All of it has been explicitly contradicted by them. This matters because Savannah Guthrie, in her first television interview about the case, said something that anyone whose parent has been hurt will recognize. She said, "It is too much to bear to think that I brought this to her bedside, that it is because of me." She apologized to her mother on television for being famous enough that someone might come for her family because of it. That is a daughter carrying a kind of weight nobody should have to carry. And the public conversation around this case has, in many corners, made that weight worse, not better. The sheriff has cleared the family. The evidence points outward. The man on the porch was someone else. What we know that matters. Step back from the speculation and look at what the verified record actually contains. A masked man who is 5'9" to 5'10", with a dark mustache and a possible tattoo on his right wrist, walked up to Nancy Guthrie's front door at 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, 2026. He disabled her doorbell camera by tampering with it, and then covering the lens with foliage from a potted plant. He was armed. The handgun was in a distinctive holster he did not appear to know how to wear correctly. He was carrying a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack from Walmart. He was wearing a ring. 41 minutes after the camera went dark, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnected from her phone. By the time deputies arrived the next afternoon, the back door was propped open. Nancy's phone and purse were inside the house. A trail of blood drops confirmed to be hers was near the front door. She was gone. The FBI is currently using advanced sequencing technology on a hair sample recovered from inside the home, the same technique that identified the Golden State Killer, the same technique that identified Brian Kohberger. Once a profile is generated and uploaded to genealogical databases, the investigative timeline moves from years to weeks. The Pima County Sheriff has cleared the family. A retired FBI assistant director has said publicly that the answer is in Tucson, meaning someone with local knowledge of the property and the family's routines. 3 months on, no suspect has been named. No arrest has been made. Nobody outside the investigation knows where Nancy Guthrie is. The reward currently stands at over $1 million. Anyone with information is asked to contact the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 5203-514-900. The case. That is not cold. 3 months without an arrest is a long time. It is long enough that public attention starts to drift. Long enough that the news cycle moves on. Long enough that some people start asking whether the case has gone cold. It has not gone cold. It is, by every available indication, in the most active phase a case like this ever reaches. The DNA is in the lab. The genealogical analysis is running. The neighborhood canvas for surveillance footage is still expanding. The FBI is still carrying images of that distinctive holster to gun stores in Tucson, asking the same question they were asking on day one. Have you seen this? The man on the porch made mistakes. He wore the holster wrong. He left a glove. He left a hair, possibly more than one. He may have been on camera somewhere in the days before February 1st, doing reconnaissance, with his face uncovered. He almost certainly used a phone that pinged off cell towers along his route. He is somewhere right now, going about his day, watching the same news coverage everyone else is watching, and waiting to see whether the science, catches up. It usually does. The Golden State Killer was caught in 2018, 42 years after his first crime, because of a great-great-great-great-grandparent shared with a stranger who uploaded their DNA to a public database. Brian Kohberger was caught in less than 7 weeks. Genetic genealogy does not negotiate with how careful the suspect was. It does not care about masks or gloves or covered lenses or disabled cameras. It cares about a single strand of hair and the family tree that strand opens up. Somewhere out there, an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker is, hopefully, still alive, and in any case, still loved. And somewhere out there, a man who is 5'9" to 5'10" with a dark mustache and a possible tattoo on his right wrist is waking up every morning and checking the news to see if today is the day his name appears. That day is coming. The science does not move fast, but it moves. If you want to follow this case responsibly as it develops, with verified facts and no speculation about people who have not been charged, subscribe and turn on notifications. When the FBI names a suspect, when an arrest is made, when Nancy Guthrie is found, this channel will have it, and we will tell it the way it actually happened, not the way it gets told in the comments. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 3 months. Her family is still waiting. Her name is still on the FBI's active investigation list, and somewhere, in a lab, a sample of evidence is being processed that may finally turn this case from a question into an answer. If you have any information, no matter how small, the tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. Somebody saw something. Somebody knows something. The point of this kind of coverage is not to point fingers. It is to make sure the right person, the one with the missing piece, sees this and picks up the phone. That is how cases like this end. Not with a viral video, with a phone call